Herb Alpert, the icon of an entire music empire, stood still for a few seconds, then said something that left the entire audience speechless. "I was wrong." 4 decades of silence shattered in an instant. The man who raised Karen Carpenter from obscurity to legend was also the man who stifled her last chance. The confession was brutally late, but enough to bring the past to the surface. This was more than just a story between two people. This was the deepest, darkest corner in the history of a voice gone too soon. In 1979, the Carpenters were on hiatus. Richard Carpenter had retreated from the spotlight to treat his addiction to Quaaludes. Karen Carpenter, then 29, stepped outside the duo's shadow for the first time in her career to try something on her own. She flew to New York, teamed up with producer Phil Ramone, who had worked with Billy Joel and Barbra Streisand, and began recording a solo album.
If you're not going to be working this year, I want to make a solo album. Of course, I wasn't happy about that.
Karen didn't want to recreate the soft, safe sound that had been associated with her image for nearly a decade. She sought songs that were more mature, with more emotional depth, both in content and harmony. Songs like If I Had You, My Body Keeps Changing My Mind, and Making Love in the Afternoon showed a different Karen Carpenter, powerful, confident, and no longer hiding behind drums or the image of a shy, innocent girl.
If I had you in my life.
The project cost nearly $400,000, most of it from Karen's own pocket. She spent all her time in the studio, working with a team of top musicians, paying attention to every detail of the mix. According to Phil Ramone, she was no longer a guiding artist, but the one who made all the decisions about the production. After several months, the album was completed. Karen believed this would be the turning point of her career. But what happened next nearly broke her. Richard Carpenter heard the first version and was not pleased. He felt that the album did not fit the image that the public had come to love about the Carpenters. Then the A&M Records Board was invited to listen. Herb Alpert had the final say. The decision was made: the album would not be released. The official reason was that it was not artistically sound and did not fit the market orientation of the time.
The album didn't have any hits. They believed that it didn't have any hits on it, and they weren't going to release it. It had nothing to do with me.
Richard insisted that he was not opposed to the album for personal reasons, but because it would disrupt the Carpenters' image. Herb Alpert, for many years afterward, rarely spoke about the decision. On the rare occasions when he did speak out, he simply said that he didn't feel the album was ready for release. The album's rejection left Karen reeling. In 1980, she returned to performing with Richard as if nothing had happened, but she had changed internally. Those closest to her described her as quieter, less talkative, and more withdrawn. She never mentioned making a solo album again. The project was pushed into the A&M archives, where it remained for 13 years. It wasn't until 1996, 13 years after Karen's death, that the album was officially released under the simple title Karen Carpenter. When the public first heard it in full, the reaction was almost shocking. Critics praised Karen's mature, flexible vocal control compared to previous recordings. Many critics believed that if the album had been released at its original time, it could have helped Karen reposition her image as an artist and opened a new phase in her career. A sense of regret became a common theme in later writings. The author of Little Girl Blue, one of the most authoritative biographies of Karen, called it her last chance to do something for herself. For those who had followed the story from the beginning, the solo album was more than a musical project. It was a statement that Karen was more than a gentle voice, accompanied by a piano, but an artist with a voice, with choices, with an identity. Although no one has directly claimed responsibility, what happened behind the scenes at A&M Records in 1980 is still a mystery. In the context of a female artist who wanted to control her own music. The system around her, including her family, colleagues, and record label, did not stand by her. It was not a betrayal, but a retreat into safety. And the price of that was a trust that was lost forever. Karen Carpenter died on the morning of February 4, 1983. She was 32 years old. The cause, according to the medical examiner's report, was heart failure due to toxicity from emetine, the main ingredient in ipecac syrup, an emetic. This caused her heart to stop beating properly. Karen was still breathing when she was found in her bedroom at her parents' home in Downey, California. But it was too late. She died at Downey Community Hospital at 9:51 a.m. Her body, at that point, reflected the effects of years of wear and tear. Although she had gained about 30 pounds since her most severe weight loss, her heart was no longer able to cope. The report also noted a blood sugar level of 110 mg/dl, more than 10 times the normal level, indicating a severe metabolic disorder. The root cause had begun years earlier, in a silent and prolonged process that was almost impossible to detect on the surface. In the mid-1970s, when the Carpenters were at their peak, Karen began losing weight for concerts and television appearances. But her weight control spiraled out of control. She counted calories, refused to eat in public, and resorted to extreme measures, diuretics, laxatives, crash diets, and hours of daily exercise. At one point, she was said to be taking up to 90 laxatives a night. The condition was not publicized. The media had no clear concept of eating disorders at the time, and Karen herself did not admit that she had a problem. Those close to her thought she was obsessed with controlling her body, but did not understand that it was a disease. Her rapid weight loss changed her image dramatically, but the public praised her slim appearance, making Karen believe that she was on the right track. In 1981, after much advice from friends and family, she sought out New York therapist Stephen Levenkron, who specialized in treating eating disorders. The process was not easy. Karen missed sessions and did not adhere strictly to her recovery plan. Still, Levenkron said he saw progress, especially in changing her perception of food and body image. In September 1982, Karen was hospitalized in Los Angeles for severe fatigue. She was fed intravenously for 2 months and regained weight. Outwardly, she began to regain her vitality. Doctors believed her recovery was going well, but her heart, after years of malnutrition and medication, was severely damaged. No one realized it until it was too late. One point of contention for years afterward was whether Karen had actually used ipecac syrup. Stephen Levenkron and her family denied it, saying no ipecac was found in her apartment. Nevertheless, emetine, the active ingredient in ipecac, was still found in her system. Some doctors speculated that she may have used it, but kept it hidden. Inconsistencies in testimony and evidence meant that the truth was never fully confirmed. Karen's death came as a huge shock to the public. For years, eating disorders had been largely hidden from the public eye. After her death, the phrase anorexia nervosa first appeared in the American press. The public began to look back at her earlier images, from the radiant, close to you, look to the haggard look of her final performances, and realized what they had missed. It wasn't just her physical decline, but an internal battle that Karen had endured in silence. The Carpenter family established the Karen A. Carpenter Memorial Fund to support research and awareness of eating disorders. Karen's case has been featured in numerous medical books, documentaries, and educational programs. Her death helped change the way the entertainment and media industries treat women's body image. Artists such as Madonna, Sheryl Crow, and Alanis Morissette have since acknowledged that they were deeply influenced by Karen's voice and the lessons about mental health that her death left behind. Some in the industry have called it an unintentional sacrifice. Karen did not want to become a symbol of a social issue, but inadvertently opened the door to public awareness. From an artist who wanted to do something different, to a body collapsing in silence. The distance is not long. But in that short time, Karen Carpenter left a story that was enough to awaken an entire industry. The Silent Teacher. Herb Alpert was the man who laid the foundation for the Carpenters' success. He wasn't their direct producer, but he was the one who signed the duo in 1969 when most of A&M's executives were still skeptical. Karen Carpenter's deep, almost off-key voice gave Alpert pause. There was no marketing strategy behind it. He simply heard her voice and thought, "This is something you can't miss." Over the next several years, Alpert monitored the Carpenters' career, keeping a low profile but always present. When their debut album Offering flopped, he urged them to persevere. When Richard Carpenter couldn't find a song strong enough to break through, Alpert suggested they long to be close to you. And when the band needed a musician to perfect their studio sound, he brought them in with the legendary Wrecking Crew. But Alpert's relationship with Karen wasn't entirely personal. It was more professional, where they understood each other more through music than words. He rarely appeared in public with her. There aren't many behind-the-scenes photos or accounts of private conversations. But colleagues say Karen always had a special respect for him, the man who believed in her when no one else did. The most remarkable moment between them occurred in late 1982, just weeks before Karen died. She stopped by the A&M office, where Alpert happened to be. When she entered the room, she smiled, raised her hand, and said simply, "Hey, Herbie, look at me. Are you okay?" Alpert recalled that she looked radiant, her hair done, her smile wide, her eyes bright. He was convinced she had overcome her depression. They talked for a few minutes about plans to return to recording. There was no indication of what was going on inside Karen. 2 weeks later, he received word that she had died of heart failure. The shock was accompanied by a sense of loss, not just of loss, but of misunderstanding. In 2012, during a performance at the Café Carlyle, Herb Alpert publicly expressed his feelings about Karen for the first time. As he introduced a song, he suddenly stopped, bowed his head, was silent for a moment, and then burst into tears. The audience was silent. Then he said only one sentence, "I miss her. I really miss her." It was not a tribute. It was a state of being torn between the feelings of someone who was so close, but did not know. Later interviews showed that Alpert held Karen in the highest regard. He repeatedly called her an unrepeatable voice, a person who shut people up with one note. But he also distanced himself from the subject of her decline. When asked about her rejected solo album, he said simply, "I don't think it reflects who she was." When asked about her death, he said simply, "It was something that no one saw coming." That silence lasted for more than 40 years, until March 2025. At a special performance in Boston, Herb Alpert, now 90 years old, stopped playing his trumpet to pay a special tribute to Karen. In front of hundreds of people, he recalled their last meeting, her eyes, that smile. "I didn't think it was the last time," he said. "I thought she would come back, but she didn't. No explanation. No reason." That statement was enough to establish he had been carrying something in his heart for 4 decades, and now he was willing to let it go. Though he doesn't say much, what Alpert chooses to withhold and what he ultimately chooses to say carries weight. He doesn't justify what happened with the solo album. He doesn't deny the hurt Karen carried. But in a single act, a public tribute at age 90, he acknowledges that his silence is part of the story. Empire of the Forced Voice. A&M Records was founded in 1962 by Herb Alpert and Jerry Moss as a small label in a garage behind a house in Hollywood. From the beginning, Alpert established a distinct operating philosophy: respect for artists, freedom to develop, and avoidance of boardroom conventions. That made A&M an ideal starting point for names that didn't follow trends. Carole King, Cat Stevens, Joe Cocker, The Police, and, of course, the Carpenters. In 1969, Karen and Richard Carpenter sent a demo to A&M. Most executives who heard it thought their music was too light, too sweet, and lacking in punch to compete with the rock and funk of the day. Herb Alpert didn't think so. When he heard Karen sing "Your Wonderful Parade," he immediately offered her a contract. It was one of the most instinctive artistic decisions he ever made, and one of the most successful deals the label ever made, though he didn't directly produce. Alpert kept a close eye on the Carpenters' musical development. He provided suggestions for arrangements, introduced them to professional musicians, and advised on release strategies. Notably, he was the one who put Richard in charge of the song "They Long to Be Close to You," which helped the duo top the Billboard charts for 4 weeks and become a national phenomenon. But that support came with an implicit condition to maintain a soft, accessible image that fit the label's positioning. In the 1970s, as A&M expanded rapidly, with hundreds of employees and dozens of artists at a time, commercial pressures began to dictate artistic decisions more and more. What had once been individual flexibility was replaced by a common standard. In this context, the clean, easy image of the Carpenters became a fixed brand. And that's why things fell apart when Karen tried to step outside that comfort zone with her solo album. Many inside A&M feared that Karen's release of a disco-inspired album with a modern sound and direct lyrics would undermine the brand the label had built. Herb Alpert did not create that view, but he had the final say. Alpert was caught between the need to protect the artist's image and the need to maintain the integrity of the label. He chose the latter. Alpert later said that early A&M felt like a family. But as the company grew, that intimacy faded. Artists no longer had direct access to the co-founders. Decisions were made through intermediaries, through executives and business strategies. A&M was no longer a place where voices could express themselves freely, but a place where voices had to fit into a format that fit an established formula for success. The rejection of Karen's solo album reflected that change. No longer a label that encouraged trial and error. A&M was now putting commercial interests first. For Karen, the decision was more than just a professional disappointment. It was a symptom of an environment she had once trusted and no longer felt safe. What happened to Karen cannot be separated from the system in which she operated. And Herb Alpert, while not directly creating the pressure, was an integral part of that machine, where a beloved voice was held within the confines imposed by the names that had once supported her. Remaining heritage. Nearly half a century after Karen Carpenter's death, her music remains as influential as ever. Songs like "We've Only Just Begun," "Superstar," and "Rainy Days" and "Mondays" continue to be played every holiday season. Every time old memories are stirred, no remixes, no arrangements, just that original voice, warm, deep, and precise as an instrument, is enough to touch listeners over time. Karen was never a loud artist. She did not possess a flashy high note, nor did she use flashy techniques, but each of her recordings was emotionally clear, driven by absolute control of volume and nuance. That is why many of her contemporaries and later artists have acknowledged that they learned restraint and expression from her, not through force, but through depth. Rolling Stone once listed her as one of the 100 greatest singers in the world. NPR called her one of the most distinctive female voices in American pop history. But for the public, the title is less important than the feeling to hear Karen sing. You know exactly what she wants to say? Not a note too high, not a beat too low. Her death marked the end of one chapter in her career, but also the beginning of another. Since 1983, Richard Carpenter has released unreleased recordings, compilation albums, and behind-the-scenes material. The tapes that survived the A&M archives have been restored, edited, and brought to light. The public has gradually realized that Karen left behind much more than anyone thought. Karen Carpenter is no more, but her music still resonates as if it were never absent. And sometimes it's the words spoken too late, like Herb Alpert's, that remind us of the value of listening before it's too late. If you find this story worth remembering, please share the video to spread what should be recognized. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to continue accompanying us on our hidden musical journeys. We always want to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below.